Rabbi Akwetey, are you there?
Yes, sir.
And Rabbi Rozenberg, are you with us right now?
Yes, Shalom. You hear me?
All right, we hear you loud and clear. Basil, I'm gonna pitch it to you because basically, in this discussion today that we're gonna have with both rabbis, it's important that we really cover the grounds on the Hebrew Israelites in Africa because there's way more evidence of Hebrew Israelites in Africa other than the Igbos, the Lembas, and the Ethiopian Jews. And with that being said, at least that basically opens up a huge window in regards to the slave trades that happened all the way from Senegal, Gambia, all the way around Liberia, Sierra Leone to Akan land, the Ga, Ewe, and even to the Yorubas and the Igbos, and even if you go further into East Africa with the Bantus people. But Basil, you can go ahead and start with the discussion in regards to are the Igbos the only Hebrews that people talk about in West Africa?
Thank you very much, Mr. Ron, Madam Tina, Rabbi Rozenberg. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share about the ancient Hebrews, as we now call them. 2 weeks ago, a claim was made by my elder brother, Remy, about the Igbos being one of the five ancient communities in the world. And though I disagree with that statement, I'm not arguing with my brother Remy. I just wanted to make it clear that that claim is not accurate. There are more Hebrews on the continent of Africa than the five that he listed 2 weeks ago.
All right. Rozenberg, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd love to just chime in for a second just so we can, this conversation should hopefully be all about clarity. I don't necessarily represent the viewpoints of Remy Lona, but I would like to discuss what he's mentioning, what he's referring to. And he mentioned, he said 5 select groups. I could already list, much more than that of different groups around the world who are claiming or have an identity from being from the people of Israel. And when someone lists Mizrahi, Sephardi, and Ashkenazi as 3 different groups, that wouldn't be correct necessarily, because they would be considered one group based on the adoption of the laws that it's Mizrahi, Ashkenazi. It would be Yemenite, Moroccan, Iranian, Iraqi. There was Syrian. These were communities all throughout the region for the last 2,000 years who've been aligned with the same exact version, basically, of the Torah and its understanding. And so, I'm open to having a discussion now of where else in Africa we're finding these remnants, and is it, from the people who are saying it, or is it from scholars and educators? And I'd like to just turn the ball back to Rabbi for a second, who are on the line with, who I appreciate the time as well. So we're discussing these different groups and communities. So the title Rabbi is an interesting title. So I want to discuss just for a second the rabbi that we're on the phone with, where his teachings of the Torah are coming from, where his rabbihood is based. And I'd just like to we have a clear idea of where the line's getting drawn between certain customs and traditions from 2,000 years to place communities in their proper. So does that question make sense that I'd like to discuss with the rabbi for a second, or should I be more clear?
Basil?
It makes sense. Rabbi Basil?
Yes, thank you for the question, but I would like to answer that question offline or at another time. I would want us to stick to the topic, and we can clarify.
Okay, sure. We could
that later.
Stick to the topic if you don't want to discuss it. I was just suggesting that we'll get to that later. I'll circle back why I think that's a relevant question. So from my perspective, and I follow. I'm on Instagram. I look at the feed page for the Hebrews. I don't know. I don't feel comfortable. The word Negro. I could say Hebrews to Negro. I know there's a stigma with saying the N word. I try to avoid it. But I follow him on Instagram, And I see that they'll say certain things like, okay, we're focusing on the Igbo or focusing on the Pashtun or certain areas where there's 25, 40 million, to make it seem like it's almost like a Jewish conspiracy that we're picking and choosing who's on board for this and, who we think should be in or should not be in. And from my perspective, that's not accurate. What's really happening, and I've met the people on the ground, is when Israel became a state in the 1940s, a political state, there was researchers and academics and groups of rabbis independent from the government who were wonderful, beautiful people who actually started doing research around the world of the groups who are identifying from the people of Israel. And they wrote academic bodies and courseworks and papers about it. And there's been, studies, and Jewish people are flying around the world to meet these people. And they're basing this work on the groups around the world who are claiming or have this identity. And so I would think it would be hard to argue that almost any group would rival in size and in what we're seeing in the Igbo group of their return to their indigenous claim to be from the ancient people of Israel and to return to that identity and re-embrace the Torah lifestyle. I'm not seeing anywhere in the African area something as large as that who are creating, Facebook groups and they're writing books and there's texts and they're reaching out to other communities around the world and they're building, they're developing. For me, that's a fascinating phenomenon. So that doesn't mean if there's another group who would do the same as the Igbo and come out openly as a nation, as a people, that would also be a fantastic thing for the world probably that could be a great contribution. So when I've heard about there's groups in Ghana that are identified as Hebrew Israelites and they've done research in the customs and traditions, but that would be small groups of people doing research on behalf of the many. So what we're looking for, what we think should have happen, if this is something on the many, maybe they've been persecuted and forgot who they are, but where are we holding as far as a nationhood identity of these communities on the western coast of Africa outside of the Igbo? That's part of my question for now. If that makes sense.
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you for your question. If you can give me a few extra time to answer this. A misconception that people hold of the ancient Israelites is that we are a lost tribe. The truth is we are not lost at all. The reason we seem lost to the world is because the world is unaware of our true name. We are actually identified by the wrong name. When we think about the ancient Israelites, Jews is what comes into the minds of most people. But the word Jew does not appear anywhere in the Bible's original text. Although the name Jew is commonly used to identify the Israelites, the name does not exist in the original text of the Bible. You will see Yehudi, Judahite, or maybe Judean. If you should travel back in time, let's get it straight, and you met the ancient Israelites and you call them Jews, they will stare at you blankly because that is not their designation. Therefore, if we use the name Jew in our search for the tribes of Israel, we're going to come up empty. And we have proof of that. Since this was not our true designation and we did not call ourselves such, then a search will end up with nothing. When you do and find us, however, by our true name, you will find many of us still with the original ancient tongue that the text of the Torah was written in, customs and traditions still preserved intact and carrying on exactly as you read in the Torah. The reason why a small bunch of Europeans managed to take over the second biggest continent and dominated it was because of the system of divide and rule. All they had to do with divide and rule was pit Africans against each other. They succeeded tremendously because of the lack of history that existed amongst the local people. This was exploited and further enhanced in the Bond of 1884 when they met in Berlin, Germany to define their trade zones and divided Africa amongst themselves. The result is the boundaries you have now, whereas before there were no boundaries and the people could move freely about on the continent and be at home.
This all changed after 1884. Africa was broken into countries and new identities far removed from what was before. It is wise, therefore, for anyone who writes and talks about the Hebrews in Africa to start the search by first removing these artificial boundaries. Remove these boundaries, remove these imaginary lines brought about by the Berlin Conference, or what was called the Scramble for Africa, and you end up with a place called Evenigba, meaning Hebrew land. I'll repeat that. Remove the boundaries that you see in Africa right now. Remove the imaginary lines. And what you have in West Africa is a place that was once called Evenigba, which translates into English as Hebrew land. And it was made up of various Hebrew tribes stretching across 4 countries currently: Ghana, Togo, Benin, Nigeria. These are the groups that make up, right now in West Africa, what we call the Hebrews. Evenigba, as I mentioned, translates into English as Hebrew land. This is the true name of the people of the book. Eve, not Ivre, not Igbo, not Jews. Eve is what became Hebraicus in Latin and then was translated into English as Hebrew. So if you start off looking for Hebrews, you're going to miss us. If you start off looking for Jews, you miss us. If you start off looking for Igbos, you just find a group of people in what is now Nigeria. But this strip of land, that's called Hebrew land, Evenigba, which was to be named later as the Slave Coast during the transatlantic slave trade, was ruled by the Aja people, who are of the tribe of Judah, with their seat of power being Old Oyo before the advent of the Europeans. So before we talk about the Igbo, before we make any claim about Africa, we have to remove the boundaries, and then we can start talking from them. Otherwise, you're just going to do hit and miss. If you don't know the ancient name of the people, there's no way we can find them.
Okay, thank you so much for the answer. Just to make some comments on what you've just said, and then we can start and move forward. You opened up by speaking by saying there was a stigma in the world today with the term lost tribes. That and just to explain the initial inception of the term when it was used was during the First Temple period, when there was a split in the kingdom, when the Assyrian army exiled the northern 10 tribes who fled into the north and also fled towards the east. I'm sure exiles ended up in Africa at one point in life also, but obviously we do know they went in different directions, north and east as well. When that had happened, they became lost from the perspective of the Judean kingdom because they were separated from the Judean kingdom. And then as the Judean kingdom went into exile and they went to Babylon, then they came back to Israel, and there was actually sages and scholars in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah in Israel writing down code of law and redacting law. They were referring to these missing people still as the lost tribes. So when, let's say, a certain group will come back from Africa, if they're from the tribes of Judah, they necessarily wouldn't be in the category of what the Jewish people would use the term lost tribes for. Because the lost tribes is really pinned to the 10 tribes, in Hebrew called the Aseret HaShvatim, the 10 tribes. So that's just one thing. And then you said the word Jew doesn't exist in the Bible. Say the word Yehudi, which means of Judah or Judahite, does exist in the Bible. Well, I get that. That makes a lot of sense. The word Jew, we can look where it's derived from. It comes from the term Jude, which from Germany, which is based on Yahud, which is based on someone from Judah, Yehuda or Yehudi. And so that word became about from a certain part of the European exile. But if you went to a Yemenite, who you call today a Yemenite Jew, they would never have heard of the word Jew 200, 300 years ago. But it doesn't mean they still weren't who they say they are. And just today, because they identify, it may not be the best term to identify, or, to identify them. So, yeah, I think you made a good point. The word Jew, which is a modern word, doesn't exist in the Bible because it came about in the exile. It was an exile term. So it's just the point I wanted to make over there. And then, excuse me, and then you said, you started talking about the tribes in Africa, which I think is great, and you start speaking about the boundaries and dissolving British borders. I think that's a great idea to do. Just from my understanding that the Igbo, when I speak to them, when I learn from them, they would tell me that their culture, which is a very rich culture, I've read books about it, is not found or similar to the other cultures of the other Bantu-speaking tribes. When they really analyze and look at it, they say there's 99% difference in the cultures of these tribes. So, yeah, I can understand that the white man maybe pitted Africans against other Africans, even though I do know that there were Africans selling other Africans to white slave owners. Maybe they were divisive and caused those fights to happen, I don't know. And also in the time of Egypt, there were Africans enslaving Africans, which predates the European white man entry. So I don't think that African against African violence is exclusive to the white man's intervention. But you speak about these lines, and if you dissolve them, you're just going to have this land called Hebrew land, which also Igbo, I was told, means Hebrew, Hebrew. The question is, again, it's going to go back to my original point. So you, as a detective or an investigator, are going to come up with a theory based on the names of the regions and certain things that you lay out, which may make a lot of sense on paper. You're suggesting that large groups of people are from the house of Israel. What I'm saying, are those large groups of people actually doing anything about preserving what they've heard from their parents, if they are from the house of Israel, making movements, have an identity? I mentioned to you, Rabbi, that there was another community in Ghana that I had a relationship with who said they're from the people of Israel. And you mentioned to me that yes, indeed, but they were from a different tribe. They weren't from your clan or your tribe. So I'm wondering, what's stopping this unity? Like what I see with the Igbo, what's stopping the books being written in the Facebook groups and this amazing unity? What's the objectives in the way that it's right now just not a one-man show saying it's you, but it's not a scaled, large operation. It's more of an idea or a thought based on people. So, and you said if you strip their culture raw, you'll see they're speaking Paleo-Hebrew. I get all of that you think that there's all these signs. But the question is, what about the identity? Where is that going to come and shine into the world?
That's a very good question, and I'll start with identity. See, the problem with, let me not say the problem, but being something is a cultural identity. There is no need to broadcast that to the world if you're comfortable with who you are. Like I said, these customs that we keep that are from the Torah are not religious customs. They are our culture. We do them instinctively without thinking about them. So coming on Facebook to broadcast that I am Hebrew is something that we don't do. It is our culture. Nobody in America comes and broadcasts, hey, I'm American. No, that's your culture. We've known this growing up. Well, so we don't need to have Facebook pages broadcasting this. That's the difference. We're not trying to show the world that, hey, this is who we are. No, this is our culture. If the world cares to know, they come to us and we tell them this is who we are, and we prove it by our cultures, we prove it by our customs, our traditions, our history, and then the language. So it's not, I know you're trying to find the Hebrews. That's why you want them to be on Facebook, and that is okay. But to ask what we are doing to broadcast this or showcase this is nothing that I think is a necessity, because we're not trying to prove anything to anybody. Yes, we're trying to reach out to our families across the Atlantic where their slaves were taken from Evenigba to the rest of the world. We're trying to reach out to them, but it's not to broadcast who we are, because we don't have identity crisis.
Right. Thank you, Rabbi, for the nice response. So I want to ask a furthermore deeper question. You're saying that your Hebrew identity is not it's a culture. It's ingrained in you. It's not something you need to showcase, because it's what you guys do. But correct. I would argue and say that the Torah is not necessarily just a culture thing. There's a lot of commandments in there that it requires us to do still today in the exile. So where is those texts listing the commandments? Where are the books of the prophecies and the scriptures and how to observe Sabbath and how to take the species together in the holiday of Sukkot and bind them together? What species are they? So this is it. The Torah, yes, a lot of it is culture, but a lot of it is also just actual laws on humanity. So And so it's really nice for you to say that you don't need the Facebook groups and this is who we are and we're reaching out to our brothers in the exile. But who's we? I understand you are, but I'm still lacking what we're talking about as far as an identity that is not, your specific sub-tribe or your clan in Africa, but that you are saying we're the people of Israel who are fulfilling prophecies that we have preserved for thousands of years, and this is what we have to be doing. And then this goes back to my original question to you: would you call yourself rabbi? From where does that Torah wisdom come from? That school of thought? How did it get into your hands? And I would want to know: did it date back to the Gaonic period of the time of the schools of Torah in Babylon and etc., where the Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jews also have their Torah teachings from? So it goes back to a deeper question of, where's the Torah in the whole entire picture? Has the Torah been forgotten and you're a remnant community just practicing customs and traditions? And if so, where are you going to get the Torah back from? Or do you have Torahs and scriptures? This is part of the whole question as well.
May I ask a question?
Okay.
May I ask a question really quick,
yes,
just for my own clarity? So, Rabbi Rozenberg, I think I'm not clear when you mention different groups on social media. Are you referring to like different camps that are proclaiming that they're Israelite, or different organizations? Like when you mention Facebook groups, are you speaking about specific groups, or are you talking about in totality?
Well, I'll list like a few offhand. So right now there's groups where I see Igbo, sharing Torah and discussing national identity and building up under the foundations of Torah. I see specific Igbo groups where they're relating and speaking to other groups around the world who have an identity to being for the people of Israel. I'm seeing that with the Pashtun in Afghanistan as well, where they're making Facebook groups called, from the House of Israel, and they're reaching out to other groups. And it's happening in India and Japan, and with the descendants of the Inquisition in Portugal and South America. There's kind of this, like, what part of my work is doing is seeing who's saying that we're in, who's saying that they are from the House of Israel, not who do we think would be because of certain geographical names of maps and names that they're, specific anthropological identities beyond that of who's actually, as a nation, identifying as from the House of Israel. That's really my main question. And all this evidence about Africans all throughout Africa, of Hebrews all throughout Africa, is exciting to me. That sounds great. Let's weed them out. Let's find them out. Let's unite them. Let's create a voice. But so if we're not there now, if that's not where we are now, what would be the next steps to get there? To see it. Will these people adopt the Torah? Will they return to the Torah? Or do they have a Torah? Do they not have a Torah, etc.?
Okay, Rabbi, when you say groups, that's the problem. We don't have groups. We belong to tribes. That is
that's what
the Torah tells us.
I understand how tribal... so I understand that.
Correct.
When
so when you say groups, I'm looking at Facebook groups. We don't do groups.
Okay,
we do tribes.
Right. For example, in Afghanistan, they have 25 million, the Pashtun, who identify as being from the 10 northern tribes of Israel. Amongst the Pashtun, they have different sub-clans and sub-tribes that only intermarry with each other, and they live in different regions, and they've evolved into their own unique customs and traditions. Something that happens amongst all 25 million of them is they call themselves Bani Israel, the children of Israel. And they'll start to list all these customs and traditions that they're doing that are from the House of Israel. And, if you look 500 years ago, this is the case. 1,000 years ago, they've been there for 2,700 years since the tribes of Israel went to the Far East. So when I'm speaking about, it's very clear for anyone who would look at these people for a split second to say, these people are not only practicing customs and traditions of the people of Israel, they're calling themselves on the name of Israel, on mass, not a few educated scholars trying to go around the villages of Afghanistan convincing people who you really are, which maybe you may have to do to certain Israelites. But I'm showing you that that's what I'm seeing in Afghanistan. That's what we're seeing in Nigeria. It's 40 million there, 25 million there. We're almost at 100 million people between two nations. So I could imagine how many hundreds more would happen according to the groups you're speaking about. But where are they now, literally now, as far as this identity and vis-a-vis the Torah and keeping the laws of the Torah?
Okay, so we have tribes. We have the tribe of Gad. We have the tribe of Dan.
we have the Anglo-Evers, we have the Judahites. These are all tribes that are resident through these 4 countries that I mentioned, from Ghana to Nigeria. We've been keeping the feast of Yahweh. We've been doing the circumcision. We've been, let's take the Passover, for example.
Is this 8-day circumcision?
8-day circumcision, yes. Before we get to the circumcision,
so you're saying now on the well, I just want to clarify. You're saying on the radio now that all these tribes that you're mentioning outside of the Igbo are practicing 8-day circumcision en masse by the millions and the millions of people. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. And we started doing this from the 1500s. Before then, before there was an Igbo in Nigeria, because when we were migrating and we got to Nigeria, there was no Igbo.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So no, I was just not under the impression that there was millions and millions and millions and millions of people outside of the Igbo doing 8-day circumcision. So that was something I would look into and verify to see if that's actually happening. But that would be something that, it's like what I'm under the impression of, most of these tribes that you're mentioning really have much not to do with each other culture-wise, especially in relation to the Igbo. But if you're telling me that, no, across them there are these things that are happening that are going beyond their specific tribes, like 8-day circumcision, that's something that should be looked into and explored. But like I said, this is news to me, so I'd want to hear more things like this that you'd want to discuss that are across the board amongst the different tribes that you're mentioning, that the Yoruba and the Igbo are both doing. From my perspective, I actually heard stories from some Igbo men that when they were on the slave ships brought to America, I wouldn't use the word disgusted, but they weren't comfortable being next to other males that weren't circumcised from the Yoruba tribes. And I didn't know the Yoruba tribes were doing 8-day circumcision today. So that would all be news to me.
Yes, so that's what I was saying, that you had mentioned groups, and I'm saying no, we are tribes. And these tribes across these 4 countries do perform these traditions that are in the Torah, even more to the detail than the Igbos, or even the 5 ancient communities that was mentioned. Let's take the Passover for a second. Do you know any supposedly Israelites that paints the doorpost with blood today?
I've heard of it happening in places in certain villages in Afghanistan, but I wouldn't say that I would be able to quickly point out who's slaughtering sheep and painting the doorposts with blood.
Is this something that the Torah tells us to do?
Sure. I mean, the Torah tells us to do it at that time. I don't know, for continuous generations, how that would work. I mean, there's certain things like animal sacrifices that the Torah told us to do. And then in the destruction of the temple, we'll see in the prophecies, they'll say, now we use our lip service in lieu of the animal sacrifices. So those were specific cases where certain customs and traditions were cut off at the time of the destruction of the temple.
Yes, I don't think that included the Passover feast and what we're supposed to do there, because it was very critical for us getting out of Egypt. The reason I'm asking is because we do it to the T. We were doing this before we met the Europeans. When they met us, they thought it was idol worship. I'm talking about the Arabs in West Africa. So you come to my tribe, the tribe of Gad. Let me explain to you what we do during the Passover feast and the detail.
So your tribe is the tribe of Gad of Africa? Sorry to interrupt. I just want to be very clear when we're speaking.
Yes, the tribe of Gad. We are the Gadites.
All right. Is there like a population like on Wikipedia for this specific tribe of humans? Is there like a reference to them as an identity?
Yes, you can look them up on Wikipedia. Just type Gad in Ghana. G-A, Ghana. And you see, that's even misleading because we actually span these 4 countries. We're not just in Ghana. You find us from Ghana all the way to Nigeria. You find us in the Congo. You find us in South Africa. We are all over the place because we kept our migration route and we know who went where. But back to the Passover that I was talking about.
You're saying there's this tribe called Gad today. So I'm looking at Wikipedia now. I'm not seeing. I type in the words Gad, Ghana, Wikipedia. I'm not seeing anything come up right now to say
G-A without the D. G-A without the D. Or try the Gadangbe, because we're made up of Gad and Dan.
Okay,
while
so
you look that up,
radio, sure.
Correct. So while you look that up, I want to focus on the Passover, because we're given instructions on what to do during the Passover. We're not supposed to have yeast in the meal, and we keep to that. We're supposed to put the blood on our doorposts, the lintels and the 2 doorposts. We do that.
Wait, just to go back, you say, so for how many days do you guys not eat yeast on the holiday?
For the whole week.
And this is, so you're saying millions and millions and millions of people.
People travel from all over overseas and come back to the family house, because that's what the Torah tells us. We should eat it as a family. It's a big feast, and everybody knows about it. In West Africa, the Igbos know about it because there's some Gadites in Igbo land, there's some Gadites in Nigeria that keep this feast also. And this is the Passover feast. We have the Homawo, we have the Mayeli. Mayeli is the Feast of Weeks, Shavuot. We have Mato. Mato is the Feast of Sukkot. We've been keeping these before the Europeans came.
Okay, so listen, so you're saying that, I see that this Gadambe tribe you're speaking about is 2 million people. Are you saying all these 2 million people are doing 8th-day circumcision?
All of them. It's a culture. We call it Pojemo. I can tell you what we do during the Pojemo. Actually, let me share this with you. We do it at dawn, because we use the dew of the morning to bless the child. Why do we do that? Because when you read the book of Genesis, a mist came from the ground, ascended from the ground, and the Most High took from that, the soil that the mist watered, and created Adam. So we mimic that. At dawn, this is when we do, on the 8th day, we do what we call Pojemo. Every Ga child does this. We are known for that. Every single one of them.
Okay, so now just a quick question. So you're saying these Gadambe people, let's say 2 million people, they're all doing, let's make a list, like 8th incision. You're saying that's what they're doing on the record. You're saying all these 2 million people are painting their doorposts with blood. Right? That's correct?
And correct. And those who cannot afford the blood, they use what we call Akwetey, that is red earth. And we paint it. Let me finish.
You're saying, okay, sorry.
Yeah. And then,
you're saying that
in the afternoon, wait a second, in the afternoon, there's a gunshot. And everybody is told, don't come out this evening, because the angel of death is going to pass. Exactly as you have it in the Torah. My question is, how come we're keeping it to the detail, and those that are recognized as Jews don't keep it to the detail? And yet, it wasn't something we learned from the Europeans.
Well, like I said again, let me go back. Let's backtrack just a second before we go. That the Torah that the Jewish quote unquote people today has nothing to do with Europe. It finished off in Europe, but where it started had zero to do with Europe. If anything,
I did not mention Europe.
A lot of it flourished. When you're speaking about prior to Europeans or Europe, you keep referring to Europe as far as the
no. When I say Europeans, no. Let me correct that. When I say Europeans, I'm talking about the Europeans that came on ships to take us as slaves. I'm not mentioning Jews. Before the missionaries came to West Africa, we were keeping these feasts before they came. So the question is, where did we get it from?
Okay, so right. So let's keep digging a little bit. So you've retained. You're saying we'll keep exploring here. We'll hold space a little bit. So you're saying you've retained a lot of customs and traditions. We'll circle back to, but over time there are no Torah scrolls or books of the prophecies or books of the prophets. This is just kind of oral tradition being passed down from exiled communities. Is that what you're suggesting?
Correct, because the Levites were responsible for that. when we're migrating,
and
it was the Levites who were responsible for that.
And from your perspective, just to go back with why I'm saying what I said before, you were saying that why are you keeping things to the T, these customs and laws, better than use the word the Europeans and this is where I came in and said when you say better than Europeans, that the Torah that the Jewish people have today has nothing to do with Europe. It's way before Europe, back to Babylon.
I did not say Europeans. You're mistaken me. When I said Europeans, I was talking about the missionaries that came on slave ships.
Right, okay, so we'll listen, I guess we'll listen to this call over again. I was under the impression that you said that why are you keeping things to a T in your culture, unlike the European Jews or so. Let's
no,
pretend
I said,
you just use
unlike
those that
I said those that are recognized as Jews are not keeping it to the T.
Right, so I'll give you a benefit of the doubt that I probably misheard that, and I apologize then. But let's go back, even if that's the case. Let's go back if that is the case. You're saying why are we keeping these laws and customs more precise than the Jews? It would be interesting to say that. Let's say you are now coming back and you're identifying and you're saying this is who we are. And I'm going to go back to my question. What about the Torah? Where is the Torah coming from? I mean, I look today and I see that the Jewish people, quote unquote, which came from Yemen, Morocco, Iraq, Syria, some places in Europe, and all these regions, they had a unified transmission of Torah, of the actual scrolls and their understanding. Outside the Ethiopians, who have their own scripts as well, I don't know one human group alive today, including the Igbo and including the Pashtun, who've maintained a transmission of Torah throughout the generations. Would you say that anyone who's studying a Bible today is thanks to the Torah transmission, because the time of the Septuagint, when it was translated by the sages of Israel from the Torah version that's been passed down to the Bible? So the question is, it's great that you're saying, which if what you're saying is true, that 2 million people are painting blood on their doorposts and doing 8-day circumcisions and doing all these commandments, I would be shocked why an Israeli academic hasn't come in and write an academic paper on these 2 million people yet, which is why I'm a little skeptical of what's really going on, but I'm very open and eager
that is a low blow. No, I don't accept that. Why would an Israeli academic come and write about this? Who said we need Israeli academics to write about our history? Why can it not be the Eves? Wait a second. Why can you not accept an Eve who is writing about our own history? Why do we need Israeli academics to do that for us?
I didn't suggest you needed anything. What I'm saying is,
no, but why is using that as a yardstick? Who gave the Israeli?
I'll tell you exactly why.
Them the yardstick to determine who is Hebrew and who is not.
I know, and I didn't say
who determines that.
Who is not. I will tell you. No, I think you're getting a little carried away right now. I'm not speaking about anything.
No, I'm not. What I'm trying to say is, what you said was offensive. That's why I said that. Because we don't need your scholars to write about us for people to accept us. We write about ourselves and we tell the world who we are.
That as an offensive comment, and I'll re-explain why it wasn't an offensive comment and why you've misunderstood everything I was just said. When I say you keep saying we don't need, and I'm not saying you guys need anything. I'm not saying Israeli scholars are in charge of who is and who isn't from Israel. What I'm saying is, for the last 50 to 60 years, millions and millions and millions of dollars get poured into philanthropy for institutions in Israel who have educated scholars who are non-biased, non-political, non-biased people who, for the love of their life, have a passion for searching around the whole entire world for people with customs and traditions that date back or that are aligned with the people of Israel. They're not doing that because you need them. They're doing that because they're fascinated and they love it, and it's their passion and it's their calling, and they're not trying to convert anyone. They're not trying to be political. They're just doing it. So I would say by now, statistically, someone would have documented that there's 2 million people doing 8-day circumcision and painting blood on their doorposts. That is the first time I'm hearing it. The Igbo
the question rather should be that it means that they're not honest, because if they've done a thorough job of West Africa, they should know this, because this is commonly known. It means that your academics are not being honest; they're being biased.
Well,
because if they do know history and they've known, like what I just said, let's remove the boundaries. Have they done that?
Have they come to talk to the people? Have they followed the migration route? They haven't done that. So when you sit and you try to justify that, okay, because of your Israeli academics, what makes them academics and don't make us academics?
You're again misunderstanding what I'm saying right now.
No,
because you're saying that.
I'm saying that because that was a low blow. I'm telling you as an academic. I'm telling you as someone who studies the culture, someone who lives the culture. And I'm telling you from the horse's own mouth. You don't need an Israeli academic to confirm anything that I'm saying. You have to come to me. You have to come to us and do your research. So what you should do is you have to go back to them and ask them why don't they know about us if they're not biased.
Right. So that's what I'm trying to get to, and that's what I'm trying to say is why don't they know about you? There's got to be a good reason. We got to get to the bottom of it. But I'm looking around
because maybe they're prejudiced. Maybe it's just the Igbos they are interested in. Because if you know about the Igbos, you see, if you know about the Igbos, then you should know about the other tribes because we predate the Igbos.
Like I said,
when we were migration,
doesn't mean you're from the same family as them.
No, we are one people. We are all Eves. But some of us were migrating before they were migrating.
All right. I got it. So you're saying, that they're biased, they're prejudiced, they're not looking at their must be liars. You're saying all these things. But I'm going around the whole internet trying to find what you're talking about, where these 2 million people, where I could read about the 8th-day circumcision, where I could read about the blood on the doorpost. If this is happening amongst millions and millions of people in their culture, and today in the digital world, this would be something that would be apparent, not hidden.
It is apparent. It's apparent. I'm surprised you don't know about it. That's the problem.
Brothers, I'm going to interrupt you because we may have to have a part 2 to go into that question a little further. But I know that Brother Ron had a question or he had a comment, and then maybe we can table that specific question and move on to something else. And then if you guys are available and willing, we can come back for part 2 and delve deeper into that because it's a valid question. Why don't they know? And Rabbi Bezo, it's valid what you're saying. We have our own history, and there are a lot of underlying factors at play when it comes to the knowledge and history and culture of melanin people in Africa and in the States. So that question, that discussion probably deserves its own show. But Brother Ron, I know you had something to say.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to say to Harry Rozenberg is that they, when you look at all the different research and facts that's out there, like when you look at because I study DNA a lot, and DNA, of course, can exonerate somebody from being committed a murder versus somebody that's innocent versus if you're the father of a child, and they want to say who if you're really the father, use DNA. So when they did studies on the different people like the Igbos, the Yorubas, the Ga, the Akan people, Akan land, the Yoruba land, what they found was this is a study done at the University of Ibadan, which is in Nigeria, the National Human Genome Center at Howard University. These are different geneticists that have done studies on this, and they basically said that the population genetic difference between these groups of people in West Africa is less than 1%. So what that means is that the Yorubas, the Igbos, the Ga, the Akans, the Kikongo, the Cameroon, the Bamileke, and a lot of other West African Bantu tribes are 99.9% basically the same people. They're all the Bantus people. And the word Bantus actually means basically like the people, like group of people. So when you see Baganda, Bakongo, you look at all these different words that have Ba in it, which they used to have back in the day, that basically means that they're the people of this certain group. And so when you see 8th-day circumcision, like if I talk to somebody from the Bamileke tribe and they say, oh, we circumcised, and then you say, well, what day? And then they think to their head, oh, we circumcised on the 8th day. They're not just pulling this out because the Europeans taught them this. And then if you go to East Africa and you say the same thing, and you ask them these questions, and they tell you exactly the same Hebrew traditions and customs. Now, this is an interesting thing, and I talked about this in the last show. In the Arabs, they took slaves on East Africa, and they took the slaves all the way to India, to Indonesia, Java, to China, to Japan. The Chinese people documented about all these things about the black slaves they were getting from East Africa that were Bantu people. But of course, when you're reading this text in Chinese, they talk about, they call them different names, like Zengji, and they talk about different laws, like the Dashi law, the Daquan law, and the Zunzun law. You wouldn't know what that is unless you ask a Chinese person that speaks Mandarin or Cantonese what this is. But if you also read their text, you will see that these people are actually Bantus people. Like, for instance, some of the people that were taken from the East African coast were from the Malawi Chua tribe. And the Chua tribe in Malawi, they are Bantus people, and they came from the Congo. And from the Congo, they went to Zambia, and eventually they landed into Malawi, which is near Mozambique and Tanzania. But the Chinese documented in their books that these people that they took, they were black. They didn't eat the meat of pigs, dogs, and donkeys and horses. They circumcised. Every seventh day was a day of rest. They basically they sacrificed, gave drink offerings and cake offerings only to the Queen of Heaven, which is in Jeremiah. They were doing pagan things, and they didn't collect business loans or interest. They didn't. I mean, it's a lot of things that they talk about they did, which basically stems from Hebrew traditions and culture in terms of purification laws, dietary laws, sacrificing of animals for sins, new moon festivals, the different feast days like the Passover. All these different things were what the Baptist people were doing from the Ga and the Ewe, the Igbos. Even when you look at the languages of the people in the Congo that speak Kikongo and Lingala, these people actually tell me what these words mean and how to say them. And you go looking in the Hebrew Strong's, and it's basically the same thing. And this is why the Europeans, when they came into Africa, they documented and wrote books about the languages of the Congo people, the languages of the Ewe people, the languages of the Kikuyu and the Kamba people, the languages of the Yoruba and Igbo people, because they, in my opinion, they knew that these people were Hebrews. But social media is not going to talk about all these Hebrews in Africa because a lot of them, like the Bible says, they're going to lose their tradition, they're going to lose their heritage of who they are. That's all part of the curses of Israel. This is why you see a lot of people in West Africa, Senegal, Gambia, from the Serer, the Tukulur, the Wolof, the Mandingo, Sonike tribe that are worshiping Allah and Islam, but they don't know the ancient script goes back to ancient Hebrew and Aramaic. But the only people that would know that would be the people that are in the British libraries and Jewish libraries, because they actually have the scripts of the people that spoke these ancient languages. Of course, things are now different, but back in the day, different scholars like Askia Muhammad, Leo Africanus, Muhammad Bello, and different people documented that these people over here in West Africa were originally Jews. They were originally Jews, and they were infidels. They did not worship Islam. They had one creator God, and they had all these Hebrew traditions and customs. They knew this because they were of a different nation. The Hausas, the Tuaregs, the Fulani, all these people, the Moors, they were different people than the Bantus people that were in Africa. What Akwetey is trying to tell you is that we are all the same people. And different tribes, they all have Hebrewisms and traditions and customs. Sorry.
Well, I'm sorry. Sorry for interrupting you, sir. But we do have a caller on the line that has a question or a comment. Brother Kofi is in the queue, so if we could take a couple minutes to address his question, that would be awesome. Brother Kofi?
Shalom. Shalom. Thank you for allowing me. Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Shalom. Thank you for allowing me in today's radio show. It's been a great topic. My question is to the Rabbi. I forgot his name. It's hard to pronounce, but he keep mentioning to Rabbi Akwetey about it should be the European Jews or whoever is in Israel, they should have known about our people. By the way, I'm from the Ewe tribe. The Ewe Enigma, the way we actually say in my language, I'm an Ewe spoken language. We say Ewe, Enigma. Enigma is a land. We were well, now when I got into the tour, I found out who I was. Then I called back home. I talked to my people, my mom, my uncles, and stuff like that. Our people are really then lost. They're not lost. They know who they are. We've been practicing these practices over time. For now, from how long that Rabbi Akwetey was saying, and it's true. We are the same people. We have our people in Ghana, Togo, and Nigeria, Benin. All the Ewe, and I did my research on, is over 5 million of Ewe around the world, and more. And the question you keep asking the rabbi about why they didn't record it, why should they record it? Who gives them authority about our people, our history? If it's anything, we got a question for y'all. What are the curses those Jews that say in the land of Jerusalem right now, what are the curses they went through? We can go to the scripture and pull out the curses of the real Israelite. We go to Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 15. The Most High saying these things gonna happen to y'all if y'all didn't listen to His voice. So the question is to that rabbi, what the curses those Europeans that's supposed to be recorded in our history? What are the curses they went through?
Right. I appreciate you calling in. Yeah, sorry about that.
No, I'm sorry,
Yes, ma'am.
Rabbi Rozenberg. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I interrupted. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. I mean, there's a few things I'd just like to respond to him. One is, I don't know how familiar you are with the European Jewish history, not even European Jewish history, just Jewish history in general for the last 2,000 years has been filled with rape, pogroms. Jews couldn't own land. Jews were considered second-class citizens. Jews had very horrible lives living in the lands of the nations. It was just a much more recent phenomenon of wealth in the Jewish communities because they really did suffer in Europe. But I don't believe that those curses are necessarily falling to the exclusive whole house of Israel, because I know there's certain prophecies that relate to specific remnants of the people of Israel. For example, when Judah is blessed by Jacob, that he's going to hold on to the scepter of the law until Shiloh comes. In Genesis it says, and we know this is referring to he's going to hold on to the scepter of the law throughout the whole duration of the exile. So I would say that doesn't mean every single Israelite will. That means that this specific camp will. And secondly is, if I'm not trying to disprove that all these things are happening in the region you're talking about. My stance is not to disprove it. My stance is to understand and learn about it. So if what you're saying is that you come from a clan of millions of people who have this identity, forget other people writing about you. Where can I learn about, on the internet? Some blogger, some poster, some human must be sharing this. I would love for the Hebrews to Negroes Network to follow up with you guys and get content and links to share where we can actually see, hey, there's not one scholar saying that everyone's doing it, but this is where we're starting to see a pattern emerging, and that would be a fascinating thing. And then I promise you, from the bottom of my heart, that the Jewish people would get blown away. They'd be fascinated. They'd be thrilled. They'd be so happy to see that this is happening in these regions of the world and this identity is happening. That would make everyone much, very optimistic about a good future if that would be the case. So I would put the ball in your court to please continue what you're doing, I guess, and educate of really what's going on and post some links. And not from the one person speaking on behalf of everyone else. Just where can I see that the culture of the Bantu people is to circumcise on the 8th day? Forgetting if the European said it or not. Someone's saying it.
Well,
yes, Rabbi, you should have asked that from the beginning, because you were challenging what I was saying. I was telling you that this is my culture. Let me finish, please. Let me. I know, but when I was telling you, I'm telling you my culture, and you're asking me to prove it. You're challenging me that no, it's not. Because if you go back and you listen, that's what you'll hear. I'm telling you these customs that we've kept, that we still keep, regardless of any missionary influence. I'm giving you the details. I'm telling you with circumcise. You said the Eurobelts don't circumcise. They do circumcise. So these facts,
circumcised on the 8th day specifically.
Yes,
but
specifically.
Rabbi,
what you don't understand is when I talk about the Eve, like my brother Kofi said, I'm talking about the whole group. I'm not talking about just the Igbos. The Igbos fall under the designation Eve. So the moment you single out the Igbo, the moment you acknowledge the Igbo, you should acknowledge all of it. We're not asking for acknowledgement, though.
Exactly.
But we're just telling you that if you look on the coast, this is who we are. I want to say this, I don't want to sound rude. Do we care if you accept it? Not at all. Because we don't have to prove it to you. We are telling you, you take it or you leave it. But what we should do is go back to the Torah and look at the customs and see who is keeping the customs.
Well, two things. One is when you go back and look at the Torah, where are you going to get that Torah from? You're going to get it from the only transmission that exists on planet Earth today that passes the Torah down from generation to generation. That's the first thing. Second thing is,
and who did that? Who passed? Rabbi, stop there. Who passed the Torah down from generation to generation? And can you prove that
we
to me?
Can start from the. yes, we have every single name recorded for every single generation that has transpired since the time of Ezra and Nehemiah when they returned from Babylon to Jerusalem, to Israel. We can list and name every single human from that time today who is responsible for being on a chain of passing on a Torah.
Okay, thank you very much. With that question,
can I ask a question?
Ron, with that question.
May I ask a question or make a statement? So if I'm understanding correctly, Rabbi Rozenberg, you're saying that your goal is to come together with other Israelites and learn about the history of other people that maybe you didn't know about before, so that eventually we could unite as a people. And what Rabbi Amaah Basil was saying is that the European Jew, or whatever, needs to accept the fact or be open to the reality that our culture started in Africa. And so instead of us coming to you, maybe y'all need to come to us. I might not be understanding this correctly, but I think the overall goal for both of you is that there needs to be unity among Israel. Am I correct, or did I miss it?
Well, the thing is that Rabbi, like what Basil is trying to get across is that there's not the Jews, the European Jews are not the dictators of who's Israel, who's not. So the Israelites in Africa, they don't have to, prove who they are because they already know who they are. But when you have people in Israel that say that we can trace our lineage and the Torah is passed down from us from 2,600 years ago, even dating back to the times of King Solomon and King David, which is almost 3,000 years ago. This is a huge feat to say that you've been passed down the Torah and passed down the knowledge of who you are according to your tribe for so many generations, whether it's through the maternal lineage or the paternal lineage, because most of the times you guys say the maternal lineage, which is not in the Bible at all. But what I want to say before I kick it to Basil is that, when you talk about the feast days and we're keeping the African Israelites are keeping the feast days, but in Exodus 34:23 it says that you should celebrate the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of First Fruits, and the Wheat Harvest, and the Feast of Inga of the turn of the year. And 3 times a year, all your males should be able to appear before the Lord. But it says that the God of Israel will drive out the nations before you, enlarge the borders, and no man shall covet your land when you go up 3 times a year to appear before the Lord our God. So if that's a lifelong prophecy, then during the Passover massacre in 2002, when you had about 30 to 40 Israelis die and then maybe 140 got injured against the Palestinians, obviously somebody was trying to cover the land that it's not their land, but the land that they was in before, covered the land when the Passover massacre happened. And in terms of enlarging the borders, the people in Israel today don't even possess the territory of Asher, the territory of Gad, East Manasseh, and even parts of the tribe of Judah. So even though they're saying and trying to get the people of Africa, the Baptist people, to admit that they're Israelites or show proof that they're Israelites, they don't even fit the curses of Israel or any of the prophecies that was given to us and told by us by the old-time prophets in the Old Testament. And so the question really should be, in terms of Basil also proving, that we have all these traditions and customs and that are ancient, including Paleo-Hebrew, which I want Basil to touch on, is that the Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews really don't have any grounds to say that they are of the ancient Hebrew community. This is actually coming from us that all the Hebrew traditions and customs, basically stem from. We are the root, and then you guys are essentially the branches or the Gentiles that the world calls, the Bible calls, or proselytes. So it's really the other way around, and Basil can confirm that with the language in terms of Paleo-Hebrew and the ancient customs, in addition to things that you guys don't keep in terms of the lashes, like in Guinea. They had tribes that did not go more than 40 lashes. And the people that was over there looking at them were like, why are they not going past 40 lashes? And they had names that mimicked the Old Testament names. And when they talked about their ancestors, they talked about basically Old Testament people like it was their people, their ancestors. And so even when you look at the slave records, you see people named Kuya, Hagaya, Enya that were taken on slave ships from Ibibio, Calabar, Cross River area, basically southeast Nigeria. Why are these slaves with the names Hagaya, Enya, Togaya, Kuya, with the names Yah in the end? Why are they having names in Yah in the end and having Hebrew traditions and customs and also ancient Paleo-Hebrew in their language? And Basil can confirm with that with the Ewe language.
Right. Okay. I appreciate your sentiments. First of all, I just want to touch on what Tina said before. is 100% the goal here is to create a unity. And what the rabbi I'm speaking with would take as a challenge, it's more of not a challenge of trying to disprove them, more of like an honest intellectual curiosity. And you don't have to respond to me like, why should we, why should we do this? Why should you not be very open about the fact that there's millions and millions and millions of people all doing, certain cultures? I was under the impression before this call from speaking to Remy and other Igbo men that, they may be 99% genetically tied together, but their cultures are 99% different. That's what I was told. So somewhere over here, there's got to be a transparent analysis or just a study of really what's going on. And not for the sake of you needing to prove it to anyone so you could convince someone that you're Jewish or not. There's nothing to do with it. This has to do with creating an opportunity for unity. If you have millions of people in Ghana who have a single identity, that's great. Then you can much easier to dissolve the British borders once you have those many millions of people. But I was under the impression that there's different clans who are not culturally similar to one another. And secondly, you mentioned all the prophecies that the people in Israel today can't possibly fulfill the prophecies. But I don't know offhand, I'm not that smart, how many prophecies there are today that speak about the future, maybe hundreds. And it's kind of like a mathematical formula, because some may seem to contradict others. Some happen in certain periods of time. Some are specific to certain parts of tribes, and some other not. I could see a prophecy today that says, I will gather you amongst those that have already been gathered, to imply that there's one wave of, so I could also say it's very easy to start picking and choosing prophecies and who could apply to which one. Secondly, I would also say when you say the Palestinians and the Passover massacre, I don't know if you know about this statistic, but they say 25% of the Palestinians in Israel actually have Jewish roots and were forced converted to Islam over the times. And then statistically, today in Israel, the terrorists are statistically coming from the villages that were once Jewish, which is a whole other question, a whole other radio show of why that's the case. But it's a phenomenon, and we say it's a psychological disorder from having a non-identity. But whatever it is, these are just you make very big generalizations to try to disprove. So my whole thing, which may seem contrary to how I spoke to the rabbi today, if I was disrespectful, I apologize, is not to point fingers and say who isn't. It's to point fingers and say who is saying they are. There's a great evil in the world. And I know you know about this evil because I see your Instagram post, and you're on the money with a lot of the evil today. But the logical thing for me is when we're fighting evil, we got to draw a line of not DNA and not this and not that, but draw a line of ideology and righteousness. And then after we've banished the evil from the world, you could, if you're the priest of the planet Earth, that's great. I'll accept it if the Creator comes in like we believe He will and intervenes. That's awesome. But until then, we have to have a great unity. So when I'm asking the rabbi all these questions, it's not because I'm trying to disprove him. It's so I can go to a community, speak in front of 1,000 Jews, and say, "Hey, did you guys know this is happening in Ghana?" Without sounding like that I'm actually pulling this information from real content. And when the Pashtun in Afghanistan said they're from the tribes of Israel, the first thing they did was we started sending surveys and pulling data and taking testimony from people in different villages. And now this is the most coolest thing on planet Earth, that there's millions of people with this identity. So I think instead of when this whole thing emerges, which I hope it would with the Ghana and these tribes out there, people aren't going to respond with criticism. They're going to respond by being blown away. But this, I think to get this unity, if you are who you say you are, and this evil is who we believe it is, so let's unite. But let's just be transparent about who's in, Not educators speaking on behalf of the millions, but the millions showing up to the table to unite.
Well, Basil, this I'm going to say, I'm going to leave it alone. The thing is, if the Ashkenazi Sephardic Jews and the so-called white Arabs, the Palestinians, the Lebanese, the Iraqis, if they all have the same DNA, which was confirmed by Michael Hammer, geneticist at the University of Arizona, and the DNA of the Ashkenazi Sephardic Jews, maternal and paternal is the same as European people walking around in Europe today that are Catholics, that are atheists, and the Arabs today that are in Palestine have the same DNA as the Central Asians or the Ottoman so-called Turkmen, the Ugyars, the Avars, the Khazars, all sons of Tokamoth, son of Gomer, son of Japheth. That means that for Joseph Flavius and how he talks about the Gomerites and the Magites and the Scythians and the Germanic tribes and all these different people, you guys are essentially what the Bible calls Gog and Magog. And so the Palestinians and the Ashkenazi Sephardic Jews all are genetically the same. You all came from Central Asia, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, the Uyghurs. You basically came over to East Asia Minor, East Europe, as you want to call it. You basically came down into the land, took over the land. The Ottoman Turks took over Israel, took over North Africa, took over Arabia and the Middle East. So you guys are basically telling people, the world, that you are the real Arabs, the real Jews, and you essentially are the sons of Japheth. And the problem is that you guys are coming and saying, oh, the Igbos are the only people in Africa that are the Jew, or the real Jews. But genetically, all the Bantu people in Africa are the same person, the same people, and they all have the same traditions and customs that you can see scattered in different tribes, whether it's the Mandingo, the Soninke, the Yoruba, the Ibibio, the Edo, Bini people, or the Igbo people. And so what they're trying to say is that you have way more people that are Israelites in Africa, and you guys are statistically saying that 95 to 90% of worldwide Jewry is Ashkenazi, Sephardic, and Mizrahi Jews, and that's incorrect.
Right.
But
so
Basil, I want Basil to explain to you how the ancient traditions and customs, like they didn't have the Mishnah and the Zohar and the Talmud. They don't have that. That's something that was produced in 300 AD time.
What about the Torah itself? Forget the Mishnah. Talk about the Torah.
The Torah, okay. You want to talk about the Emo Yoquain people that live in Yoruba land? They possess an old Torah written in Aramaic, Moroccan Arabic, and the old Yoruba language. They say they are the Jews that came from Iberia after the Spanish Inquisition. When they tested their DNA, the Emo Yoquain people, means the strange people. You can ask any Igbo or any Yoruba person this. They will tell you that they came from Iberia to the place where their brothers were at, which is Cape Verde, West Africa, the Bani. When they tested these people that have the Torah and follow all the Hebrew traditions and customs, different than maybe what you would see in a normal Yoruba person, they found that the DNA of those people were the same as the Yorubas, the same as the Akans, the Ewe, the Gad, the Yoruba, and the Igbos. And they have the Torah. They have the Torah. Go, you can look it up.
Mr. Ron, I want to comment.
Before we pass the ball to the rabbi, could I just finish a quick point before we pass the ball? It was fascinating that you mentioned the Iberian Peninsula, that's where the Torah came from, because actually we could trace from the Iberian Peninsula. I can name almost every single Torah institution that was there since the Israelites first arrived there, since it's well documented and recorded. So if a Torah made it from the Iberian Peninsula to somewhere in Africa, that would make sense, because we see very clearly that the Torah had a strong foundation in the Iberian Peninsula. But secondly is you shouldn't have to waste any time on your show or in your Instagram accounts trying to show that the ancient people of Israel were not white. The Jewish people today have a teaching that we say the ancient people of Israel were not white. That's not something we claim. Furthermore, the Jewish people claim today to be a small remnant of a small remnant of a small remnant of the people of Israel. We don't claim to be the 100% exclusive descendants, and if any Jew does, he's a misinformed Jew. What we do claim, however, is that this small remnant of the small remnant has been in passing down the Torah from generation to generation. And part of that transmission may have had converts on it. We wouldn't rule that out. So when you say we share genetic DNA with the people around us, which must mean we must be them, I don't know, who had converted 2,000 years ago and was responsible for being a part of the Torah transmission of passing down generations. This is just my sentiments of just clarifying what I hear from when you speak is not really what's happening on the ground from the Jewish people's perspective or in reality. So I think we should, just keep aligning on that note.
Okay, go ahead, baby.
Okay, Rabbi Rozenberg, you keep talking about the Torah. I want to ask you this question. If Moses should come back today, can he read the Torah that you have?
I personally would believe so, and I have a theory why. Because
can you share
Torah, in Jewish culture today, there's groups in Israel who won't speak Hebrew, modern Hebrew, because they say it's a sacred language, and the Israelis have profaned it. They've made it mundane by making it into a language when it's really supposed to just be used for a holy conversation and learning of the scriptures. So they won't speak Hebrew. When they developed Yiddish and when we have cursive, they wouldn't write in the Holy Scripture in Hebrew. They wouldn't consider writing in it as well because it's holy. It's only written that way in Torah. When you're writing the language outside of a Torah itself, there's other ways to write each letter. And that's law almost amongst these ancient communities. So I believe that the sacred language, the Ashuri script today that we'd call it, which is not really found, like you're saying, you find Paleo-Hebrew, not this, was considered a sacred language. I don't know if you've done studies on it or not, but there's actually books and fascinating scholarly works done for the last 2,000 years on the decoding the Hebrew letters that we have today, and the deeper meanings and the secrets of them. There's a whole world of depth on them. So I believe that this is part of a sacred transmission from Moses. A lot of the laws we have today, for example, the Torah tells you on the holiday of Sukkot to build a booth, a sukkah. But it doesn't say what a sukkah is, so it relies on us having an oral transmission.
Hang on a second. Hang on a second. You've gone off base. I just asked you about if Moses could read the Torah that we have. If he could read it, why do you term it modern Hebrew?
Brother Basil, Brother Harry.
Yeah.
So, Brother Harry, I'm going to give you opportunity to answer that question, but I want you both to know that we had 3 callers in the line. We have Miss Helen, Mr. Hando, and Miss Shani. So, Brother Rabbi Harry, if you could answer that question really, really quickly, and then we'll get our callers on, and then we can continue the conversation.
All right, yeah, my answer would be I think that Moses would be able to read it, and we have some laws today that we say that the reason we know that this is because Moses taught it from the mountain. It was transmitted from the the mouth of Moses. So I think that there's a very, very direct connection today between a lot of the customs and traditions of the Jewish people to actually what Moses was doing and what he was teaching.
Thank you, sir. So
can I? That did not answer my question. Yeah, that did not. I'm not asking you about customs. I'm asking you about a script. You call it modern Hebrew. Are you saying that he wrote the Torah
based on the letters and the words of the ancient Hebrew? When the Israelis came from Europe and resettled Israel, they made Hebrew a language, which hadn't been spoken for 2,000 years as a language almost, and it became.
That is not true. That is not true. I disagree, because Moses did not use the Masoretic square script that you have. He used the Paleo-Hebrew symbols. You cannot tell us that Moses can read
based on my theory,
the script.
Based on my theory, what I just said is that the language itself was sacred. It wasn't used to write. So there would have been, like I said, it would have been something like Paleo-Hebrew, which is a secondary language. Which all the Jews today have secondary letters and languages that they use to speak and write. And they don't write in the actual scriptures of the Torah itself because it's considered holy, and we don't want to profane it. Especially if we write God's name in Hebrew, there's drop boxes in every Jewish community around the world where you have to put sacred documents to bury in the ground because we can't damage them or profane them. So the way we treat scriptures is very, very, very sacred. And I believe that's why Paleo-Hebrew was probably a much more common way to express Torah thought and idea. But this is a theory of mine. But that's where
Thank you.
It's
a theory. I want to engage him. Okay.
Just a lot of the things we're discussing today, are theories based on people having great ideas and weaving truths together. But at the end of the day, we'll take the calls. At the end of the day, this is about unity and not about division. It's not about me proving who is the right one or the wrong one. It's about saying, again, back to the main point, there's a super-duper serious evil in the world, and we're going to have a lot of humans across planet Earth aligned to fight it. And that's really what it's going to come down to.
So we have Miss Helen that has a really brief question or comment. And so for all of our callers, as you can see, we have a lot of information we have yet to discuss. So if you could keep your question or comment to like a minute or two, we would really, really appreciate it. So Miss Helen, thank you for calling into the Hebrews and Negro Show.
Yes. Thank you for this opportunity. I have a simple question to the rabbi, the Ashkenazi rabbi, and I have a brief comment. I hear him keep saying Jewish, something that in a dictionary, something ish, if I have to say brownish, is not really brown. So where did they get the name Jewish? And another comment. When you read Psalms 83, it says nations will gather together to eliminate the name of Israel. you know. So, and when you look at all the curses that our people will go through, they won't be in the land of Israel today. So they will be scattered everywhere in the whole world. So how come every law is protecting the Jewish, I'm going to say Jewish people, that nobody can touch them? Any other person can say anything and be termed anti-Semitic, you know. But them, they have a right to say over everything, you know. So I just want to make a comment. But I want to know where they got the name Jewish.
Great. So, you know, just that's a great question. Like you have Scottish and British. It doesn't mean they're like Scots or they're like Brits. That's actually just how they refer to them. But the word for what I would have called, quote unquote, a Jew 500 or 600 years ago would have been Yahud, or Jude, Yehudi, or a Judite. That would have been the term used. Jew is a very modern word that was introduced probably the last 100 or 200 years or so, Jewish. And so that's really not such a relevant point in life because it's just a really new word, so it makes sense that it's not an ancient word. And so that question, and Israel is not set up just for a certain race of people. It's set up for people who are with the Torah. If someone adopts the Torah and becomes one with the Torah, he's eligible to move to Israel. Then you discuss, you know, how could people around the world are so quick to be labeled an anti-Semite. If they say anything, you know, how did you know, I'll tell you one thing the Jewish people have, which quote-unquote the Jews have, that everyone can learn from, is an unbelievable force of unity, meaning every single wealthy Jewish person alive today, Jew, concentrates their wealth together to protect themselves, meaning there are organizations and non-for-profits and all over the world today that are designed and established to protect the Jewish people. And so they have people watching the news, organizations watching the news, and any time there's going to be something negative about us, we'll report about it. We'll say, hey, these people are doing propaganda. This ain't bullshit about it. We're on it. We're a unified force. We act in unison. And if any nation of numbering, you know, 10 to 14 million people would do the same thing, if they pooled together their million and billionaires to protect themselves, they would also have such a force, meaning you wouldn't be able to say anything negative about them without them making a storm about it because they have one voice. So this is why you'll see today very quick to be labeled an anti-Semite if you speak against the Jews, just because we're so on top of the world as far as our protection of ourselves.
Great answer, great response. Thank you, sis, for your question and your comment. So right now we have Sister Shani on the line with a really brief question or comment.
It's not Shani, it's Shani.
Oh, Shani, my bad. Sorry, sis.
Shalom to everybody on the panel. It's a great discussion tonight, and I'm so honored to be listening to what I'm hearing tonight because it is great. But my question is for Rabbi Harry Rozenberg. Shalom, Rabbi. The question that I have, well, I don't really have a question, but I just want to make a comment on what you were saying because you were saying that Jews did not own land, and you was equating that to being included in the curses. But we all know that during the time of the Russian expansion into Europe was when your people were crossing the Pale. You were coming out of the Pale of settlements and you was crossing over into the Pale during the time of the Russian expansion into Europe, at which time you guys were given the opportunity to come to America. Not only were you given the opportunity, but you were also given 25 acres of land and you were given money. And there are many Jews that are documented in the history of America owning plantations with slaves on them. And I point you to the documentary that your Jewish historians and scholars have called The History of the Jews. It's a documentary, it's part 1 and part 2, where they really go into detail about the time of the Russian expansion, and your people crossing the Pale. Now, the second thing I want to say is this. Rabbi, I was watching a video that you and Benjamin did. And at which time you admitted in the video that it was some of your ancestors who found out that there were Africans, that there were Hebrews in Northwest Africa, and you sent letters to them. And this is before the 50th century. You said that right in the video that you were doing with Brother Benjamin. So I think that kind of like explains that, you know, I don't mean to be rude, but I'm just going to ask you this question. Why is it that you guys are the only one to say who is Hebrew and who is not Hebrew? And my last thing is this. We all know that you guys do not accept Hebrews into Israel unless they accept your 3 things that you want them to do. And one of them is the washing and also to the acceptance of the Talmud. And thank you so much for allowing me to speak.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Oh, my bad. That was my sister, Shawnee. I thought, hey, Shawnee. He said Shiny, but I know who. That's my sister. So look, really quick, we had a Brother Hando on the phone, and then after Brother Hando, if we have no more callers, we definitely want Rabbi Basil to speak about Paleo Hebrew and as part of our heritage. So, Brother Hando.
Yes, it's Brother Hondo.
Hondo, sorry, I'm really chewing up people's names. My apologies.
It's okay. It's okay. Salam to everyone. I want to make a couple of quick comments. Number one, it's very disrespectful and it's out of order for a man who comes from one of the youngest groups of Jews in the world to denigrate through denying what I believe it was Brother Basil who was talking. I'm not sure. I just got on 20 minutes ago. But when someone tells you that, look, I come from this culture and this is what I do, this is what we've been doing for, hundreds of thousands of years, and I know what it is because I'm closer to the action than you. My boots are on the ground. And for you to try to then go back door and say, well, this is not about division, it's about unity. The fact is, he has a closer tie than you do to the action. Okay, it's like a private trying to tell a 4-star general what war is like. It sounds ridiculous. It's very juvenile. Number two, I also am of the bloodline of Beta Israel. We're much older than European Jews, and I listened to what you said regarding you said something about your people being Hondo. You said something about your people being the remnant that kept Torah. We have too many groups on this earth that have older traditions than you and that are different than yours. They are different. We do not follow your customs. Well, and I have noticed. Hold on, don't interrupt me because you did it with other people. Don't interrupt me. Okay.
No,
what I noticed. Okay, that's the host.
That wasn't me trying to interrupt you.
I'm the engineer. I'm trying to let you. We want to get you live. So what's your name?
Hondo.
Hondo. Okay. Awesome. Great.
Okay. All right. So when you have a group of people like the Ashkenazi Jews who come in and they are telling everyone else who is a Jew and who is not, don't get around that point. That this is actually what's going on. When you go in and you convert people in Zimbabwe, in Cameroon, in Uganda, and you go to West Africa, and you only accept them when they take on your particular customs and traditions, that is a problem. You have no rights, nor do you have the authority to go in and do that. They have their own customs. These brothers calling in are West Africans. I have a student. He is also descended from West Africans, and he is being trained further in our customs. They follow older customs than you. You have no right nor the authority to do that. Also, if you were descended, if you and people like you were descended from bloodline Jews, you would not have pale skin, okay, unless you just totally diluted your bloodline. Okay, your skin is not suited for that type of environment. That's just the fact of the matter. The ancient Israel was also 10 times larger than present or modern day Israel. So it consisted of at the vast majority dark-skinned people, and this is a fact. And we still hold customs. My own people still hold to customs and books that are different than the ones that you hold dear. So we're not trying to hear anything you have to say. It's very racist. It's very it's a colonial mindset, and it's enslavement. I've been seeing it. I've been hearing about it for
Brother Hondo, or I don't know. Was there a question?
Take over everyone else's customs and make them yours.
Okay, so Brother Rabbi, do you want to Rabbi Harry? Do you want to comment?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would for sure comment, since he was saying that I was speaking about our transmission of the Torah, and I don't know if you weren't listening, or I'll say it again, but I did certainly mention that there was a transmission as well in Ethiopia. So there's no question about that, and we're not trying to deny that. And in Israel today, I'm not necessarily coming here representing the government of the state of Israel and how they identify Jews around the world. I clearly am creating with my work in life, a platform where it's not about being Jewish or not, it's about having an identity. So the people in Afghanistan today, they're Muslim right now, I'm not trying to get them to convert to Judaism. That's just not a political, that's not what it's about. And finally, you didn't have to convince me that the people, and we spoke about this just 10 minutes ago, that the people of the ancient land of Israel were dark-skinned. The people, the Torah that we preserve teaches that as well. So we're both on the same page. It's not something to prove us wrong. I mean, King Solomon had 1,000 wives. Can you tell me the genetic makeup of each 1,000 of his wives? You can't tell me that one person may have come out a lighter skin and blended his way in. To make this about skin color is irrelevant. And just to end off, just to keep stressing that I apologize, people are taking it that I'm attacking what this rabbi is telling me about their culture and tradition. I was born in America on the YouTube Wikipedia generation. So I'm like, hey, Achi, my brother, where can I just see this? Like, where is it? I'm not trying to say I don't believe it. I just want to learn about this. You're telling me about 5 million to more people doing something. Where can I just read about it? Where can I learn about it? I'm going to Google and I'm not finding it. I'm having trouble finding it. Do me a favor, post a link, something like that. So not from one person saying it, from where it's very clear that this is happening across the board. And I'm not saying that from a challenge like you have to prove to me. I'm saying it like, hey, maybe that's a great reason that we could unite because we're part of the same, ancient family. So this is not. I'm not coming from a place of division that people may seem that I am. I'm coming from a place of inclusion, but I'm also coming from a place of transparency. And when people make claims, they have to, so there should be very easy Googleable. We're in that generation. I apologize if I feel entitled to be able to Google things.
Well, Basil, can you go ahead and basically go over what you were saying?
Correct. So I think because why you could not find it on Google because you did not type the correct thing. When I told you what to type, Gadangbe, it came up. So it's not that we are hiding
right now, but if
you did not contact me. According to you, you asked Remy. You should have contacted me, and I've given you all the sources if you really wanted to know. But you did not. According to you, you talked to Remy.
Now we have a relationship, and now we can move forward in this dialogue. I don't think this is
just making it clear that we have to be transparent. And when we say something, we should know what we're saying and not step on anyone's toes. Okay, before we went to the question and answers, we're talking about the Hebrew script. And I'm hoping you're not saying that when Moshe wrote the Torah and gave it to us, he wrote the Aleph in the form that we have it today in modern Hebrew. Did he write an Aleph or he drew a picture of a head of a sheep?
Mm-hmm. So you're asking me a question?
Yes, sir. The question is, I can repeat the question.
No, I understand the question. I'm letting you know my personal opinion on the matter is that I believe that the script we have today is much older than we think it is.
Did he use, when he wrote the Aleph, did he use 2 yuds and a vav, or he drew a picture of a sheep?
I personally would believe that he used 2 yuds and a vav, and
that is
what we have.
That is not right. We all know that is false.
I understand that based on what we found through archaeology may not align with what I'm believing, but based on we have an understanding of the transition. And I don't think this is a make or break point. This is just one of my versions of my traditions. I personally believe that.
The text of the Torah tells us that there will be 5 cities in the land of Africa that still speak the language of Canaan. That is a prophecy. So if you say you speak Hebrew, and I'm telling you that if Moses is supposed to come back, he cannot read the Bible that we have because he did not use the script. He used a big pictograph, what we call.
Didn't he also translate the Bible into 40? How many languages? 70 languages?
That's not the question. I'm focusing on the Hebrew script.
Right. So I personally, I think for certain he would be able to read it. Whether the question is if that's what he originally wrote it in or not, so that's another question. But you can continue with your lecture.
How can you read something you did not write? If I drew the head of a sheep, how does it translate to 2 youths and a vav?
Right. Well, like I'm trying to say,
let me tell you why it's important.
The letters we have today are the building blocks of reality. We call them the DNA of the world.
That is not I know them offhand. That is a tradition that you guys teach. Moshe did not write 2 youths and a vav.
Shouldn't get in the way
he
of
wrote the head
right
of
now,
a
that's
sheep.
our tradition.
Okay, so I'm telling you that we have the ancient Paleo Hebrew script. We speak the ancient Paleo. If that's the case, it means that we are more ancient. It means that the Torah that you claim that you have, if Moses cannot read it, then we have a problem. Because I can go down the 22 alphabet and show you what they mean.
I don't know why that's a problem. If Moses wrote the Torah in 70 languages, why do we have
He first wrote it in Hebrew. You don't speak those 70 languages. You speak Hebrew. And I'm telling you, what I'm showing you, what I'm trying to do here for the audience is that the Paleo Hebrew script that Moshe used to write the Torah is still used today in Evenyigba. So my question is, how do we have the ancient tongue? How do we have the ancient tongue and you don't have it? And yet you're telling me that you have a transmission. How do you have it if it's not the head of a sheep? If it's not Bavo, if it's not Hihe, if it's not Yashi.
I mean, the script that I'm talking about is already in the time of the prophets and Ezra and Nehemiah, who were already writing
with the script
that I'm. I mean, we're finding coins under the temple that are not the head of a sheep. That they're actually, you see, what their representation for an olive would have been from First Temple periods. So at the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, I believe already, which is still in the periods of prophecy, I already believe that this was the language that the letters that we have today was coming from for sure that time, and so.
But that is not the question you're avoiding is that's not.
This is not for me. This is not a concept who's the older community, who's not the older community. No. All I'm trying to say
that's not what I'm doing. I'm trying to use these customs and traditions to show you that we say we are who we are because that's what you ask. Do we have customs and traditions? And I'm telling you, we have customs, traditions, and we preserve the ancient tongue.
Mm-hmm.
So now, what you should do is try. So now, what you do, you should do, if you really want to know about it, is ask me, where can I find these things? How can I learn it?
Yeah,
because
I'm definitely going to pick your brain, and I hope that the Hebrew to Negro show should provide links also to show that these phenomenons are stretching through different clans and cultures. Because I'm learning something new. Prior to this phone call, I thought 99% of the culture of these different groups had nothing to do with each other. Now you're telling me the exact opposite. So I'm open-minded. I'm willing to learn and go in depth. So I'll definitely reach out to you to send me information for sure.
Awesome. Well, and then if I have one more question, if that's okay. You said you could trace your lineage back to. You guys have kept a tradition. Back to, is it David?
Ezra.
Did you say that? Ezra?
Definitely.
Are you tracing
There's people today who trace back to King David, certainly, but our Torah transmission comes back from the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, who they were from a Torah transmission we know from the men of the Great Assembly and from the judges of the First Temple.
Okay. So you can trace the Torah, but not your family lineage. That's what I wanted to find out. Why I'm asking.
Well, we trace the humans. We know some of them were converts, some of them weren't converts, but it's not a hidden secret. We're not trying to cover that up. We're very proud of the people who converted over time and played a role in becoming Torah sages and passing on the teachings.
Okay. One last question for you. When Joshua was trying to find out who had taken something and Israel had lost the war that they went to, the Most High told him how to look for this person. He describes the Hebrew family structure. If you read Joshua chapter 7, you see that. He was told that he should bring the people according they should come near by families, by households, by tribes, by man by man. That's what it says. So it says tribes, families, household, man by man. This is how the Hebrew family was structured. Do you guys keep this family structure?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's definitely people today who are from the Kohen, who are traced back from a specific family clan of the tribes of Levi. We have Levites today, and we have people whose last name are Benjamini, which means they're from Benjamin. For sure, I think there's an aspect to that. But I would ask you a question also. When you had these family clans and the men, so how would the multitude that came out with Egypt with them, they would be part of the men. They wouldn't have a clan or a family they would belong to, but certainly they were considered equals. They were part of the nation.
Correct. But what I'm saying is, if you look at how, example, when Moshe came to Egypt to tell the people that Yah says, I'm bringing you out, he told the elders, and then the elders told 3 million people. The question is, how did they achieve that? It was through the family structure. When you look at Joshua 7, we see the Hebrew family structure: tribes, families, households, and then man by man. If you come to Evenigba, Hebrew land, I can tell you my tribe. I'm from the tribe of God. I can tell you my family. I'm from Amaah. I can tell you the household I belong to. I belong to Ni Amaah's family, and then I'm an individual of my own. So when you look at this structure that the Most High himself commanded Joshua how to find somebody, is this structure: tribe, family, household, and then the individual. We have kept this. And I wanted to find out if that's the same. So if I should ask you your tribe, your family, your household.
Sorry.
No, so if I should ask you that, are you able to tell me your tribe, your family, your household?
Well, I can tell you the name. So when we get called up to the Torah, it says they call me up my name, the son of who. So I could tell you I am the son of the son of the son of the son of back 2,000 years. Some people could do that for sure. But I would say in Afghanistan today, where they say they're from the lost tribes of Israel, they only intermarry within certain family clans. And they actually, I've seen their family trees that to go back to King Saul, where they have sub-clans and mini clans within clans, and for sure. So that's something that I would say they have preserved. But a lot of from the Judean exile, a lot of things have been lost as well. As far as you get sold to Rome on ship as slaves, at the fall of the first temple. So we know which families are the descendants of the Israelites that were sold to Roman slaves. We know who their last names are today, and they trace back. These are Wikipedia pages for them. Research has been done. Family documents from 2,000 years ago has been found. So there is an element to that as well for those who are able to retain it. But that's fascinating that you live that way as well. On your side.
Well, Basil, we have a caller. I don't know if he's still on the line. Named Benjamin. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Okay. Hello, Rabbi. I just want to comment about the Yoruba. Now, first and foremost, I heard you saying that the Yoruba don't circumcise on the 8th day. Being a descendant of the Yoruba,
and how they do.
Okay. Well, I understand, and I'm coming respectfully to you. I know there's a whole lot that you haven't heard, but so what I'm about to give you some sources where you can start the study and make your own conclusions, all right? And I'm about to point out some facts about the Yoruba. What Rabbi Basil is saying, Akwetey, is very true about the Ewe and all of them. But I'm going to specifically speak on the Yoruba because this is the culture I've been knowing the most, okay? One, you're going to want to get books by Modupe Oduyoye, all right? He speaks on the linguistics of the Yoruba, and when you look at these linguistics, you will find that there are a whole bunch of Hebrew words. As we know, the most important thing to any man in his culture is his God. Tell me why is it that almost every single word for God in Yoruba has a direct Hebrew cognate? We can go to Oloran, El-Ram in Hebrew, Eloah, Olua in Yoruba, Olam in Hebrew, Elemi. I mean, we can find all these words, several cognates. Even at that, if I am not mistaken, Sarah did call Abraham Baal, which means Lord, correct? When you go into Yoruba society, you find that women call the head of the compound Beale. These are basically the same words, and they did not come transmitted through Islam because a lot of these words are predating them. When you start studying the Yoruba system and the Yoruba language, and when you really start paying attention to traditions, just as, let's say, with prostration, when a Yoruba man bows to his elders, he gets all the way to the ground. You find the same thing being portrayed in Genesis when they approach anybody that is of a higher caliber or that is higher than them, or when they're seriously giving worship unto Yahweh. All right. So what I am pinpointing here is the fact that there's a heap of evidence there. All right. We have circumcision. We have all these words. In fact, there's a whole. It's so many words. Nobody really detects it. It's so many if you really study it. And I'm not, mad or anything. I understand that first you came and you said that this is stuff that you haven't heard of, that you haven't known. And I understand. But first, I would just like to comment, just as a friend to another friend. I know that you must really want to research this. I would just suggest really sitting down and researching the cultures thoroughly. And I'm not sure, but you got to be careful what the Igbos say. And I'm not going against any.
Well, basically, what he's saying that you look at the Yoruba, and you look at their divination system, the Ifa system, the Igbo Afa system, even the Ifa system with the Ewe and Voodoo, and just like the ancient Umim and Thumin, the oracle, or what you had the priest used to do back in the day with the kola nuts and the divination trade. These are all basically things that are ancient in Hebrew traditions and customs. And he's right. A lot of times you look at the priest of these areas and the Ifas and the Afas, you'll see that they are using languages that go back to ancient Hebrew. So, like I said before, in the genetics, the Yorubas are basically the same as the Igbos. They're all genetically the same. So they're all brothers. They all came from Jacob. They all came from Israel, migrated into Africa. So there's no difference between the Ga, between the Ewe, the Akan, the Oyo, the Yorubas, the Edo Bini, the Ibibio, the Igbos, and the list just goes on and on. So basically, I'll let you just, we got about 8 to 10 minutes left before we close out. So if you want to make some last comments.
Yeah, so you mentioned about some people who are Kohens. I guess you don't know about the Wulome in my tribe. Wulomo is someone who sees the future. They are a high priest. And they keep to the Levitical commandments, laws that was given to Moshe, like not going near a corpse. They actually have a Holy of Holies where they go to get words of prophecy. They don't shave their beards. They wear all white. You cannot go near them if you're not circumcised. Yeah. The Kohens that you mentioned about, do they keep these traditions and customs?
Yeah, the Kohens definitely don't go to graveyards, etc. And they don't, I believe a Kohen is also not allowed to marry someone who was once divorced. They keep those as well. And if someone in our community today, let's say a Kohen married a woman who was divorced, then his children would have that status removed from them. And then we would remember for all the history that this Kohen lost. There's actually a family today whose last name means Kohen, who lost their status of being Kohen because something happened.
Okay. So I'm saying this so that you can study that too, because we have the same thing. We have the Wulomes who follow to the detail, to the T, what is written in the Torah. And one of our Wulomes, he was called Numo Ogbame. He was the one who discovered, after the European missionaries had come to the shores of West Africa, he was the one who discovered that the Torah, or the book of Moses, the culture in it was similar to what we were doing, even when the missionaries hadn't showed up yet. So it's something that, like I said, is a culture to it. And we can see it right there in the Torah. If you read also, I want you to read this custom called Fiashidi, Fiashidi. This was the custom that Samuel the prophet had to go through when Hannah brought him to the Kohen so that he becomes an intern. This same custom that Samuel went through, that started with Jephthah's vow that he was going to give whatever that came to meet him when he came back from his war. He was going to put that on the altar. This is a 4,000-year custom. And we do this custom today in West Africa, where when somebody cannot have a child, where there are family issues, maybe untimely death that's going on in the family, one would go to the priest and make that same vow. And when they're given the fruit of the womb, they take this child and then go and dedicate this child to the temple. It's called the Bride of Yahweh. The Bride of Yahweh. This is a Torah custom that we still keep today in West Africa, what we call Evenigba. Okay, so I'm showing you all this because one has to sit and study these customs. See, when you want to know about a people, you come to the people so that they tell you about themselves. You cannot go to someone else. Let's say the Igbos or Remy shouldn't be your point of contact. Whatever he said, and I'm taking shots at him, but I would advise that you go past the Igbos. You go past the Remys because they're not the authority on the ground. Talk to the people themselves, the people that I have mentioned. Research them, and it will shock you that you will find the ancient Torah customs right there on that strip of land that is called Evenigba.
All right, two things. One is it seems like there's, a need to write a book or make a documentary about this. I'd be the first one to buy the book or watch the documentary.
I'll send you the book. We already have the books. I'll send you the book.
Yeah, and the Hebrew niggas gonna drop bombs on people too.
The next step of after reading the book is then you make relationships with people on the ground, and then you see the book comes to life. So the book should be a living thing. And I think there's other places around the world today that you can give large speeches of where they're actually doing things with the Israelites. For example, if you look at Japan, the oldest monarchy in the world today, claims to be from an ancient homeland that was exiled from their land and reestablished the kingdom in Japan. They have a holy temple in Japan today on Mount Moriah. We know that was named the mountain of the Temple of Solomon. And they have 3 chambers, an outer chamber where people celebrate, an inner chamber where they do animal sacrifices, just like the Temple of Solomon, and an inner chamber where they keep a golden ark and 4 poles today with 3 things in the ark, just like the time of Solomon, and golden birds on the ark. And so all of a sudden, and you look at the Japanese alphabet, very similar to Hebrew. A lot of the words are similar and stuff. So, when people ask me, they say, does that mean the Japanese are Jews or not Jews? I say, well, that's the wrong question. Because first of all, we don't know if 10,000 Israelites crossed the Silk Road and made it to Japan and started a kingdom. Or maybe it was one Israelite that made it there and started a kingdom and a movement. Just like when Esther went to Babylon, she rose to power. And when Joseph went to Egypt, he rose to power. This could have been the story of a businessman who rose to power and created a great influence. But for me, it all comes back to the same thing. So it's not about the wrong question. It's not about if he's Jewish or not Jewish. That's the wrong question. I don't think the future of the world is going to be dependent on are people Jewish or not Jewish. I foresee a global family forming. I think there's a verse. I have really poor memory, but I know there's a verse in the prophecies where it says this one's going to come out and call himself by the name of God, and this one's going to call himself and say he's from the house of the Lord. And there's going to be 3 or 4 different terms that people are going to refer to themselves in the future as being part of this congregation of Israel. And I see that that's what's happening today. It's very clear to me that when you have such large nations of people from around the world saying this, that our agenda should not be to battle one another and try to figure out how we could politically maneuver one to another, but to create a unity. And that being said, like I said, I don't necessarily agree with the political stance of Israel today as a state and how they relate to the diaspora and categorize who is a Jew and not a Jew. That's not necessarily something I'm supporting or defending. And we have to have a lot of teamwork going forward to get to the bottom of this. And I can't say my people haven't been involved in contributing to evil, but I can't say other people as well who come from the people of Israel don't have people amongst them who have done evil. So right now it's not about Jew or not Jew, it's about righteousness versus evil. And if there's we shouldn't be afraid to put evil out and wave it in the air. And anyone tries to defend evil, there won't be room for that.
All right. Well, we got 2 minutes on Basil and Rab and Harry, so I'm going to close it out. We're definitely going to have a part 2 to get these guys back, and we'll continue on about the Pashtun Jews, about the people in Japan, the Makochi, the Ark prototype covenant that they were basically carrying, and I can tie that into how the Ashkenazis are not the real Jews in terms of the R1A1A, which is basically seen in Central Asia and Eastern Europe. It's also seen the Pashtun Jews as well, but we'll dive into that next time we have Basil and Harry on the show.